Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you are. This is Ali Almagasu welcoming you to the latest episode of Cloud Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest this week is Ann Wallace from Google. She's a technical cloud consultant, and she's located up in the Northwest, I believe the Portland area. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ann.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. We're glad you could make it. You were a recommendation by my sometimes co-host, Vallard. He certainly seems to have a lot of respect for you, knows you from your Cisco days, and thought you'd be a great guest. So I appreciate you taking the time. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know that how we usually start is we want to take a minute to find out how you got into tech.
Yeah, I have a pretty classic story, I think. I was probably 7 when my dad got me my first computer, which this is going to show my age, but that was in the mid 80s. It was an IBM PC Junior, and I was playing a bunch of Sierra Online games, so King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest sort of things. But, it was also using the DOS operating system. I was playing all these different basic games, and then it was just really easy to get into the basic code, and I would start putting random go-to statements and then really start diving into that code. So computers had always been part of my upbringing. But when I went to college, I majored in psychology because I didn't really know that computer science was a thing that women could do, despite the fact that Sierra Online was founded by Roberta Williams and her husband, Ken Williams. And I always thought it was so neat that there was a woman that had this software company. But it wasn't until my second year of college that I realized I could actually make a career doing programming and computer science. So I changed majors from psychology to art history for a semester so I could spend a semester in Italy. and then I majored in computer science. And then that's around when all the .com stuff was going on. And I started working for a small ISP doing tech support while I was in college. And then that turned into a UNIX admin job. And so I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then .com bust happened. I took some time off, traveled around Europe. And then I had moved at that time to Portland. And I started working for Nike. And that's where I spent the last 14 years of my career. Outside, in the last 3 years, I spent a little bit of time at Cisco, but we can talk about that in a minute. But at Nike, I started as a Unix admin, and then that moved into more of the operations DevOps kind of role. And then around that time that I moved into doing a lot of the DevOps automation stuff, I started playing around with Amazon. And we had a typical story that most people have. It took a long time to get environments from our hosting provider, spin those up. So we started doing a lot of test dev stuff in AWS. And at about that time, I moved into solution architect role. And I was really key into getting Nike into moving into AWS. So the last 6 years I spent as a cloud architect, all the way from infrastructure to automation, to my last role at Nike was security architect, but all AWS focused. And then within I think it was like last 3 years, I quit Nike, went to Cisco, worked on a product called Mantle, which was a open source containerization platform, which was a lot of fun. I think it was just maybe a little early days for that. And then I went back to Nike for about 2 years. And then I got an email from Google recruiting the same day one of my best bosses ever told me she was quitting Nike. And I started to pursue that. And now here I am working on Google Cloud. But it was also kind of neat because I'd spent 6 years or so working on Amazon to kind of go into a new cloud. And there's a lot of things that Google's doing that Amazon's not, or doing it in a little bit different way. So it was kind of exciting. And then it's Google, there's a little bit of a lure there. So that's my quick history in the quick couple of minutes.
That's an interesting history. Couple questions.
Yep.
First off, when you came out of college, did you feel like you were prepared for real world IT work?
A little bit, because everything we were doing in college was on Unix. So, all the programming I was doing I was using VI mostly. My my mail client was Unix based. I think it was Elm at the time, moved to Mutt. So I think what I was doing, yes. And I also took, outside of college, some Unix classes just to kind of prepare. But not the networking. I had one, so for a while I was working in the NOC at the ISP I was working for. And I had one kind of networking class, I think my freshman year. That didn't prepare me at all. But otherwise, I think, yes, the stuff I'm doing 20 years later, no, but, maybe if I went back to college, I would cover it. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then my second question was about AWS, all the AWS work you were doing at Nike. What was the upside of it? Why was Nike moving to AWS? Like, what was there to, I know the basic cloud, use case, but can you give me any specifics about what the upside was? And when you were doing it, what were the shortcomings of AWS? Or was it just great all around?
So, the initial thing was we would get developers in, and they would need the system was too complicated to run on your desktop. So you want to test out a feature, you would need to deploy it to a development environment, which is at our hosting provider. To get new environments, it took sometimes 6 months. There was so much red tape to go through, and we just didn't have control over even firewall rules or DNS changes. And it was just a lot of tickets and try to coordination. So we're like, how can we get people spun up quickly? And so we started looking at AWS for that. So that was a huge benefit. But then it's like, then you have an environment that's a little bit different than what you have in the data center. And then, Nike being a retailer, we'd have Black Fridays, holidays, and Nike also had product launches. So like the new Jordan would come out, and you would have to, purchase VMs just sitting around for these launches. And or there were things like Oprah Winfrey's favorite things that happened one time, and we just tipped over. So then we started looking at how could we utilize the cloud for things like that, so we didn't have to just have extra capacity sitting in the data center. So, but it wasn't overnight. It took several years because, again, just like a lot of companies, the systems that were deployed in the data center, monolithic, tightly coupled. So just to pull a few things apart out of that, it just was impossible. So we started looking at things like our brand applications. So they were standalone applications. So like there would be something for the World Cup or the Olympics. We'd bring up something, or the women's marathon. And then we could kind of tune how we wanted to do development in the cloud. And, and then there's that cultural shift of we're used to deploying things this way, doing a lot of manual stuff. And within the cloud, you got to prepare for failure because the VMs might go away. So I don't know if it was so much things with Amazon versus like their services themselves versus just getting used to the way things worked in the cloud and getting developers and operations teams, their mindset to change. And then, again, it's a whole DevOps thing and just the teams working better together. I think it's a very classic story. You hear quite a bit.
I was just going to say, you touched on like every point. We needed quick scalability, or we need a burstable space. We needed to be able to get dev and test environments more quickly. Like you touched on almost everything that people go to the cloud for.
I think you also get in the scenario that Amazon starts releasing, or any of the cloud providers, that so many different services, and everyone wants to start playing around with them. And it's giving developers enough freedom to do their job, but also being able to rein things in to make sure as far as governance or security goes, what those services are doing. Or, with Amazon, not everything is encrypted at rest like Google is. So there's certain services, depending on, your PII or something, you might not be able to use. So it was there's trade-offs both ways, but overall, I think it has been a much pleasant experience for developers and operations teams, and just being able to get product out the door into production sooner.
If they were doing this that long ago, that's actually kind of on the early edge, it feels like, of larger enterprises kind of shifting over to cloud.
Yeah, there's still a lot of stuff in the data center. It was also taking the approach of a lot of the net new stuff. Let's do that Amazon instead of trying to detangle the stuff in the data center. And I think they're at that point now. And everything I'm talking about at this point was the consumer facing stuff. There's still all the back ends, B2B and just the IT stuff, which is starting to get moved into the cloud. And, they do stuff with Azure as well.
I think that's a smart way to do it, though, right? Don't
Yeah.
move the heavy stuff if you don't have to. Move the light things and then move the heavy things later, or just don't ever move them, because I think that's also becoming part of a strategy that I'm hearing more and more. Is there's some things that just aren't going to move. They're going to expire eventually, but they're not going to move as long as we're using them.
Right. And I think we're hearing that here too. And I think, I was talking with a colleague of mine, and we're kind of starting to call this like Cloud 2.0. It's not so much let's just do this lift and shift anymore. It's let's do things cloud native. And like you're saying, maybe we just leave some of the stuff in the data center, kind of let it live its course and die off, and just start doing things, in a cloud native way, using the services versus let's spin up a VM and emulate what we did in the data center. Which I think it makes it a lot more interesting, especially being in a consulting role, that you're going in there and people really want to know how to utilize all the different services that Google has versus, again, just spinning up a VM and putting your application on there.
Right. So you're starting to touch on what I was going to ask you about next. You are with Google Professional Services. Is that correct?
I am. Yes.
So tell me what Google does in that space. What is professional services can mean a lot of different things for different companies within the tech space and within other verticals as well.
So a preference is that I've been at Google less than 3 months now. So, anyone listening to this, make sure you fact check me, because I might have some things a little bit off. The organization I'm in, as far as professional services goes at Google Cloud, is fairly new. I'm technical cloud consultant. So we really partner with our customers versus being staff augs. I think there's a lot of professional services where people come in and they sit at a desk at the customer for 6 months, their duration of the project. I mean, not that we're not there for the duration of the project, but we'll come in initially, do a lot of like the architecture, figure out really what's going on, what the customer wants, and then there's a back and forth. But we have a good kind of work-life balance, so we're at home more or at the office, or versus necessarily at the customer and utilizing Hangouts and things like that to do a lot of the meetings. But we really want the customer to feel enabled, that they're doing some of the work too, and it's a partnership. So when we leave the engagement, they feel very comfortable with what's been deployed, what's been architected, and they can continue to iterate over that. We also partner with other companies. So there's Rackspace, Accenture, and companies like that help Google also do some of the work with our customers. So the professional services organization is made up of technical consultants like me. And then there's what we call strategic cloud engineers. So they're kind of a partner to me. I also, part of my role is like a technical program manager. So when we engage with a customer, I'm the one that's kind of leading the whole project. So, and then we'll also, like I said, engage with partners to do some of the hands-on work with the customers. We have technical account managers, or TAMs. We also, part of the professional services organization is our training department. So we, if we need to come in and do training, or we've done hackathons with some customers, or just, have people come in to different training locations. So I think it's unique in that way. And again, we're growing and it's changing and evolving. So it's kind of fun to be in an organization that is evolving, and you can help kind of set, kind of where we're going with things.
Yeah. So what kind of engagement would a customer typically call you guys in for? I don't know if there is a typical.
I wish there was a typical engagement. So, it's not so much like, hey, I want to go to GCP and I have this app. How do I do it? It's like we really want to shift to the cloud, or we want to shift from maybe one other cloud to GCP. We want to really change our organization. So again, there's that mindset of how you're doing development, how your organization is structured. So some of it's kind of the org, and then some of it's just the principles behind cloud. But again, like I'm saying earlier, is we're seeing a lot of people who are already in the cloud. Maybe they were at Amazon and want to shift some of the workload over to GCP because of what we're doing in ML or data analytics, or they just want to have multi-cloud, or maybe it's around some of the stuff we're doing in security, or maybe it's Kubernetes. I mean, Kubernetes is a huge draw. I mean, both the other large cloud providers have their own versions of that too. But again, it's more than just I want to move an app. It's more I really want to utilize all the services. I want to kind of shift over to Google. How do we do that?
What's the biggest challenge you feel like they're usually coming up against? And I asked that because back when I used to work at MetaCloud, and we were helping folks build online clouds, and it was, on-prem clouds, and it was a very similar thing where it required a mindset shift, a cultural shift. But the biggest technical challenge was usually the network. The network was kind of always the deal. And I say this before I went to work for a networking company at Cisco.
Yeah.
But the network was always kind of the big hitch that would kind of tend to put the brakes on the system, and they didn't want to have to refactor the network to figure out how to use cloud. It was a big deal. Is there a common technical challenge you guys run up against?
I don't know that I've been in this role long enough to say that, but yeah, network always is a challenge. I think one of the things that's interesting with the way GCP does things versus, my other experiences with Amazon is we have a shared VPC. So you can have multiple projects, which are almost like different accounts with Amazon, but you have the shared VPC. So that helps simplify some of the networking. And again, I think if people are trying to be more cloud native and using services versus trying to do all the connections over the network and using interconnect to the data center, but actually making service calls and using, APIs, it makes it a little bit easier. There's still that fear of change. There's people in the organization, even if you have it coming down from the top down, that people just are a little nervous when things are changing, that they're going to lose a job or their function is going to go away. So I think there's still that kind of dealing with that. But there's so much excitement about being able to use all these new services that I feel it's just a little bit different than it was like 4 years ago when you would come into an engagement like this.
Yes, I think you're probably right on that aspect. And it's interesting you mentioned Kubernetes, and there certainly is a lot of energy around that. All the KubeCons and even events that aren't meant to be Kubernetes centric will have so many sessions on Kubernetes. It's insane.
Yeah.
How is that is there like a little group at Cisco that's just kind of focused on Kubernetes, or is it kind of pervasive where it's across all groups?
At Google.
Yeah. Sorry. Google.
That's okay. There's probably a little one at Cisco too.
Yeah. Oh, we actually have a pretty big group.
I think it's all over the place. Google is so huge. I'm still digesting all the different organizations. Of course, there's Kelsey Hightower, who everybody knows associated with Kubernetes. But I met Maya. I forget her last name, but she is responsible for she's a PM around security for Kubernetes and containers. I think everybody who's involved with cloud is touching Kubernetes at some level. I'm going to Copenhagen at the beginning of May for KubeCon. That was actually one of the things I was really excited about coming to Google, is getting to start working on Kubernetes, especially around security. I think, people have been doing a lot of stuff with containers, but I think there's still a lot of things that are overlooked as far as container security.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So when you're talking about that, kind of Google's so big and it's everywhere. How many people? You're in the Pacific Northwest, right? And you mentioned earlier that you were, part of your job is building out a Northwest team for your organization. But how many of you? Is there a big office up there?
So there's a big office in Seattle. There's two offices. There's one in Kirkland, one in Seattle. I'm based in Portland. There's a smaller office in Portland. I think there's about 60 to 70 people in that office. I'm one of the few cloud people. There's a lot of people doing Google Home and Google Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. But it's a neat little office, and I think the office is expanding. Like you said, I'm hoping to grow our team. I'm the only one on my team, not professional services, but my particular team in the Northwest. And there's quite a few customers in the Northwest that we're working with. So I'm looking to grow the team. So this is where I can plug, we're hiring sort of thing.
That's right. Plug away.
Yeah, and it's an exciting time.
Is it as fancy as the Mountain View campus?
No.
Fun? Are there slides and?
Well, no, because it's one floor of a building in downtown Portland, but it's very, very Portland. You walk in, it feels very Portland. They've done a good job with the decorations. I've been in the Seattle office, and that one's a lot of fun too. And right now, I'm not that you can tell by the background; it's interesting. But I'm in the San Francisco office, and it's overlooking the bridge. It's just gorgeous.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're saying very Portland. First couple times I went to Portland, I was very disappointed. I didn't really get any of the Portlandness. Everybody's like, yeah, it's this really weird, funky place. And I was kind of in the suburbs. I was staying with family in the suburbs. And we went downtown, but again, they were kind of touristy places and really nice restaurants. But then I went for, what open source conference is it? I can't think of which one it is, but it was held in Portland. And I took the train each day from kind of the downtown area over to the convention center. And this one day I hear meowing on the train. And I'm looking around for the cat that has to be loose on this train. And I see like 6 seats down from me, there's a woman who's sitting up very straight, and she has glasses on, and she's wearing like a tweed suit. She looks like she's from someone's accounting department. And she is just meowing very loudly. She doesn't have a cat. There's no cat there. She's just meowing on the train to no one in particular the whole way to the convention center. And I assumed past the convention center because it was going on. But I just thought, this is it. This is my Portland experience. Middle-aged woman meowing on the train. So I know that was a rat hole of sorts. But tell me, do you have any involvement, kind of outside of Google? Are there any tech organizations, open source organizations, anything like that you're involved in you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, well, as far as open source, actually, Nike started doing Nike open source, I think a couple years ago, and I got to contribute to that, and I really enjoyed that a lot, just the community involvement there. But now that I'm with with Google, I guess I've been with all of them, but yeah, there's a lot more opportunities to get involved with the community and, getting support from leadership to, be able to sponsor things. So actually, this might air after this happens, but this weekend, my good friend Amber Milovic, who's a principal architect at Nike with Women Who Code, is doing a workshop. It's called Beyond Senior, Architecting Your Career. So it's for women who have been in maybe a development role for a while and don't necessarily want to go into management, because I think a lot of people, just not women, get to a certain point as a developer and you're like, what's next if I want to continue as an individual contributor and not go into management? So this is a workshop talking about what we do as architects and as a software architect or a solution architect. So I'm helping her run that as a teaching assistant. So that's going on in Portland. I have a couple ideas that I'm going to be running by Women Who Code, and I'm also doing another kind of career workshop with them. It's called Telling Your Tech Story, and so it's a partnership with Launch Code out of St. Louis that they do every other month, where different women talk about their story, their history, kind of like we did at the beginning of this podcast, and get to answer questions from other women on how did you get there, what did you make these decisions, and so forth. So that's exciting. And like I said, I'll be at KubeCon next month. And I think with Google has the Google Cloud Conference, which is called Next in July. I'm hoping I can speak there, and we do cloud summits. So another thing that Google is known for, or somewhat known for, is SRE, the site reliability engineering.
Yes.
And so we have a thing now called CRE, which is customer reliability engineering. And these are folks from the SRE teams that are working with Google Cloud customers on how to implement some of the principles that the SREs here do. So defining your SLOs, SLIs, so your service level indicators and objectives, and your error budgets, and how you can put all this in play for a particular application. So I'm starting to partner with those and figure out how we can bring those into PSO, the Professional Services Organization, because our CRE team works with customers who are already in Google Cloud, where we're working with customers that are moving into the cloud. So we want to start getting those methodologies into application development early. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hopefully either going to help present or just be there to answer questions around this subject at some of the cloud summits.
That's really neat. That's at Google Next, you said, or?
Yeah, there's going to be a Google Next, and then there's Google Cloud Summit. So there's smaller one-day things. But if I'm not there, there's definitely people there speaking on that. But yeah, I've been working on it with some of our SRE, CRE folks. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about with this job.
Yeah, it sounds like you get to do a lot of neat things with that job. I really, especially that first talk you mentioned with women who code.
Yep.
What's the next step if you want to remain an individual contributor? What if you don't want to be a manager? It's interesting because I've been through some management workshops at Cisco lately. And that is, I think, a question that bothers a lot of people. They love their job. They've been at it for a while. And just because they've been there a while, you kind of tend to get shoved up to become a people manager. And not everybody was meant to be a people manager.
Right.
You know, some people really just love coding or engineering, however they're engineering, and they want to keep doing it or doing whatever it is they do as an individual contributor. And the system kind of forces them up over time. And so that's really cool that they're tackling that in a talk.
Yeah, and this is a full day workshop, and you know, and again, it's focusing on the career as an architect, but there's other ways you can go as an IC, and hopefully there'll be more workshops for the other kind of, I don't know if you want to go into developer relations or product management or different things. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see where this goes.
That's cool. Well, Anne, I thank you for being on today and sharing with us a little bit of what's going on at Google. And I hope that you'll come back after you've been there a few more months and, you know, perhaps give us some more, you know, context and some more examples of kind of what your customers are up against. And because I think it'll help. I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast maybe haven't fully tackled everything yet. They're starting to tackle it. Others are deeper in, but I think, a lot will benefit from hearing, oh, this is how these customers dealt with these things. So thank you. And I will definitely look for you at some of those events I'm going to be at, that you're going to be at. If any folks who are listening want to follow you on Twitter, are you on any of the social handles? I
am. It's Ann N. Wallace. So ANN Wallace, WALLACE.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm, hopefully in a couple months, if we do this again, we can talk about some of the partnerships between Cisco and Google.
Yes, there's some exciting things happening there that we can't talk about yet, but I think we're all very excited about on both sides. So we will. And thanks again so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.